The wait is finally over. Metroid Dread is the long-awaited direct sequel to 2002's Metroid Fusion, the most recent game in the ongoing Metroid story saga, is what a very basic synopsis on the internet would probably tell you, I imagine. But it's much, much more interesting than that. Metroid Dread is a gaming miracle. It is a game that, if we're being real here, probably shouldn't even exist.
Oh, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
Metroid Dread has been in development hell since 2005. After starting life as a Nintendo DS game, it became a topic of speculation and mystery thanks to rumors, leaks, a curious scanlog in Metroid Prime 3, until ultimately vanishing from existence. Yoshio Sakamoto and company would occasionally confirm that the game at one point was a real thing, but was shelved due to current technology not being powerful enough to craft what they had in mind. But the DS eventually had a successor in the form of the 3DS. And if we're talking home consoles, Nintendo released the Wii and Wii U in the time between 2005 and when all these reports started to surface. All of these were way more powerful, mainly the Wii U, so why wasn't Dread being given a second chance? Well, we all pretty much knew why. It was hard to deny that the game was likely cancelled. This didn't mean there would never be a Metroid 5, but Metroid 5 as it was originally envisioned was pretty much dead. It had to be. The rumors wouldn't stop though, and a big reason for that in the past 4 years was the release of Samus Returns and its additions to the Metroid lore, the Chozo memories. If you 100%ed the game to unlock these images, this happened after unlocking the last one. There were two possible explanations for this. Either this was a tease for Prime 4 since it and Samus Returns were announced at the same time, or, what was more likely judging by the 2D10 that the image was labeled as, this was a tease for the next 2D Metroid game. Maybe even Metroid Dread? Psh, yeah, like that's ever gonna happen. I'll never question you ever again. Metroid Dread literally rose from the ashes and said, "I lived, bitch." It was being developed by Mercury Steam once again with Yoshio Sakamoto in his usual directorial role. A development history video released after the game's announcement at E3 2021 shed some light on some more details, such as how it was cancelled twice before finding its home on the Switch, and how Dread would mark the end of the story arc we've been following for 35 years. The story of Samus Aran's curious relationship with the Metroids. Combine this with the promising gameplay shown off during the Treehouse segment that looked to be a monumental step up from Samus Returns, and the sighting of what looked to be a Chozo in the trailer, October 8th couldn't come any sooner. And Nintendo knew just how big of a deal Metroid Dread's announcement was. Just look no further than their aggressive marketing campaign on social media during the months leading up to launch. It seemed like every day there was a Metroid-related tweet. They acknowledged Metroid's 35th birthday, for Christ's sake. That is very unlike them. In fact, I'd argue that they were showing too much. I get it, the game garnered a massive amount of hype, but these Dread reports and the trailers that followed after E3 gave away a bit too much if you ask me. Things that I feel diehard fans would likely want to be kept as a surprise for their first playthrough. Thankfully, I managed to avoid most of them. I wanted to go in as blind as possible. This was like another Final Fantasy VII remake for me, something that felt like it would never arrive until it did. October 8th, 2021 was the day that Metroid fans got their hands on Metroid Dread. I expected a Metroid game with refined Samus Returns style gameplay, a bit more of an emphasis on story, and a mostly linear structure similar to Fusion. All I hoped for was that I'd like Dread at least as much as its prequel. If it achieved that, I would deem the game a success. I know I already gave a spoiler warning at the beginning, but I'm going to do it again as well as blow my load extremely early. Because if you have even the slightest bit of interest in this game, and especially if you are a big Metroid fan who just hasn't gotten around to this for whatever reason, click off of the video now and play this ASAP. This is something that I will obviously elaborate on way more throughout the video, but Metroid Dread is one of those games where I'm smiling like a dope for the entire runtime and I'm left in disbelief by the end because of how phenomenal the journey was. Okay there, that's your final warning. Let's get on with the review, starting with, you guessed it, the story. Previously on Metroid, Samus Aran single-handedly thwarted the threat of the X, intelligent parasites that thrive on wiping out entire civilizations by infecting and killing their victims, with the added bonus of being able to nearly flawlessly mimic them and cause complete chaos. They and the Metroids were thought to be extinct after Samus blew up not only the BSL station where the X were having a field day with Galactic Federation scientists, but also the entirety of planet SR-388. Almost as if this is a Metroid game, peace in the galaxy is short-lived, this time being put to a stop after the Federation receives video footage of an X in the wild on a planet called ZDR. All this needed was one of those clickbait YouTube thumbnails and this would have been the ultimate bait. And indeed, this ends up being a trap since the Federation sends over 7 of their EMMI robots made out of the strongest stuff in the universe to investigate the source of the transmission until communication with them is lost. Since Samus is the only being in the galaxy immune to the X thanks to the Metroid DNA that was injected into her at the beginning of Fusion, she with the company of the AI Adam sets course towards ZDR to get to the bottom of all this. So I guess all's forgiven after the events of Fusion? I thought the Federation would be a little more mad after someone turned an obviously expensive piece of infrastructure into a makeshift meteorite to destroy a planet, but I'm guessing antagonizing Samus Aran wouldn't do them much good. Doesn't take long after landing on ZDR for Samus to encounter an armored Chozo warrior, who effortlessly gives Samus a run for her money and strips her of most of her equipment. Adam deduces that this Chozo is likely the one who sent the video of the X-Parasite, likely in an attempt to lure Samus herself. Making matters worse, the indestructible EMMI appeared to have been reprogrammed to hunt down the bounty hunter and kill her. On her way back to her ship on the surface, Samus comes across a much friendlier Chozo who introduces himself as Quiet Robe. In a hefty bit of exposition, he explains that he is the last member of the Toha Chozo tribe, the ones that created the Metroids on SR-388 and the ones whose DNA was donated to Samus as a child. They were almost all wiped out after being betrayed by the warrior Makin tribe led by Samus' assailant, Ravenbeak. Ravenbeak's ultimate goal was to use the Metroids to rule the galaxy. But since Samus' efforts in previous games resulted in their extinction, his only option left is to extract the Metroid DNA that's within Samus and hack the EMMI to carry out that mission. Why not command his soldiers to do it? Cause they all died after an X impersonating one of them spread and wiped out Ravenbeak's whole tribe sometime before the events of this game. Whoops. So where'd those X go? Quiet Robe, do you know? Oh, never mind. He's dead too. Doesn't take long for Samus to uncover the answer though, as later on when she enters Elon, there they are. A crap ton of X-Parasites who waste almost no time escaping and infecting everything they see that has a pulse. This is just not Samus's day, is it? What's next? The Metroid DNA in her body is going to fully awaken and she'll become a Oh god damn it. So yes, Samus now does whatever a Metroid can. Adam also concludes that Samus must have both Toha and Makin DNA in her. Oh joy. Now Samus is part human, part parasite, part bird, and part douchebird. How did Adam guess this though? Because that's not Adam. It's never been Adam since the last time he referred to Samus as Lady actually, which I didn't catch until after I beat the game. Ravenbeak pulls a Darth Vader and calls Samus his daughter as he reveals that he was the one who donated his Makin DNA to her all those years back. So sorry folks, if you want a shot with Samus Aran, I guess you've gotta go through Buck Cluck first. After an intense duel where Ravenbeak taps into his inner Sephiroth, really all that was missing was one winged angel playing in the background. He appears to have come out on top, that is until Samus becomes a full-on Metroid. Kinda, she doesn't turn into a jellyfish, sad to say. With new armor and a huge fuck you laser that puts the Super Metroid Hyper Beam to shame, Samus defeats Ravenbeak and the galaxy is now safe. Yes, a self-destruct sequence! Samus arrives at her ship but is warned by Adam that piloting it in her current state will drain its energy and leave her stranded. Thankfully, Quiet Robe, who was infected by an X-parasite shortly after they spread across ZDR, shows up in the nick of time to let Samus absorb his X-form, cancelling out that excess Metroid energy. Samus escapes just before ZDR goes up in smoke for committing the deadly sin of being visited by Samus Aran, concluding the story of Metroid Dread. Dread introduces way more additions to the series lore than I thought it was going to. The stories of 2 different Chozo tribes, Samus' origins being explored in greater detail, shit that was going on behind the scenes during the events of Metroids 1 through 4. I'm not gonna lie, I did a double take when Ravenbeak called Samus his daughter, and especially when Samus went full on Super Metroid. I think this suit is a little over the top, which I'm sure was the intention, but I don't know, it looks silly to me. But this doesn't mean I wasn't invested in the story. I was very much the entire time. The conversations with Adam, or I guess not Adam, ensured that the story didn't stagnate. While there are certainly many ways that the story could continue after this game, Dread really does feel like a finale to a story arc that has been ongoing for decades, as Sakamoto stated. Some parts are a little cheesy, but not in a bad way, not by a long shot. I think I like Fusion's story a little more at the end of the day, but Dread's is really good too. Thanks in part to, of course, the presentation. The moment I saw that fly-in sequence in the opening and that super cinematic first encounter with Ravenbeak, I knew I was in for a hell of a ride. Mercury Steam took the cinematics introduced in Samus Returns and dialed them up to 11 in Dread. And would you look at that, there's voice acting. Well, the only English voice acting is delivered by Adam Ravenbeak Malkovich, and I will from now on always read his dialogue in Fusion using that monotone computer voice.
You are faced with overwhelming power. Accept your helplessness.
The rest of the voice acting is done in the Chozo language, but the fact that there was voice acting in the first place almost made my brain explode. Also, if you want to learn more about the Chozo language, I recommend checking out my buddy HiggZ's video on it. He put a lot of work into it and it's very interesting. I'll leave a link in the description below. This was also the best way to have Samus speak. I think people are still scarred from this, so not having her speak in English was a smart move. The story is presented and told really well. The choreography and direction are absolute eye candy. And can you believe that this isn't even the best part of the game? The rest of this game is where Dread really surprised me. In fact, that comment I made earlier about how the cutscenes were dialed up to 11 going from Samus Returns to Dread, I could say the same about everything else, only instead of dialing things up to 11, well, I can't even check anymore cause the dial broke. In retrospect, playing Dread has even lowered my opinion of Samus Returns just a tiny bit, but I'm getting way ahead of myself, so let's get back on topic before I anger any more SR fans. Metroid Dread combines the fast-paced movement and control from Zero Mission and AM2R, with the combat mechanics of Samus Returns to make this the most action-packed and satisfying game to play in the whole series. First off, all complaints I had with the touchscreen commands in the last game have been completely remedied here. For the first time, Metroid takes full advantage of a modern control layout, with actions being mapped to pretty much every button you can think of. From instant morph being on the left trigger to the grapple being on the right trigger, every command is right at your fingertips. And since you start with almost no equipment again and have to slowly regain your lost abilities, the controls are taught to you gradually so you have enough time to learn them one step at a time to reduce the risk of feeling overwhelmed. Almost every aspect of the gameplay has been reworked to minimize downtime and allow for non-stop movement for players who get a kick out of zooming through the world as quickly as possible. The added slide ability makes it so you rarely ever need to come to a stop when coming across narrow spaces, especially since you can seamlessly transition from slide to morph ball. The melee counter can now be executed while still maintaining your momentum. And the one-shot kill window after parrying is thankfully not as strict as it used to be. Free aim still requires you to stop, but not only is there more freedom in terms of where you can shoot, but thanks to the analog stick being much more precise than a circle pad, replicating the classic diagonal aiming method while on the move is much more comfortable. And several power-ups like the returning speed booster and the flash shift, one of the brand new Aeon abilities, facilitate the kind of flow you can achieve. All of this, and with the wide variety of other power-ups Samus will collect, this is easily the most versatile and capable version of Samus yet. I really cannot stress on a gameplay level how fun it is to simply play Metroid Dread. You'll be schmoovin' along sooner than you think. Or not, more on that later. You know, I've already brought up a few of the upgrades at this point. Let's just get all of them done and over with. One of the cooler things that Dread does, at least I think so as a longtime fan of the series, is how it teases certain upgrades and withholds them longer than what you might be familiar with. For example, usually the Morph Ball is the first power up you'll find. Dread gives you the Charge Beam, Spider Magnet, Phantom Cloak, and the Wide Beam before you even see the Morph Ball. And there's no shortage of tunnels that are all conveniently Morph Ball size that you will pass by during this time. Come on Metroid, I know you can crawl, you can do it. When you finally get these items that have been eluding you, it's all the more fulfilling to take advantage of them when you inevitably have to retrace your steps and pay certain areas a second visit thanks to how this game is structured. Again, more on that later. Anyways, here's the Metroid Dread item roll call. I already mentioned the Charge Beam and Wide Beam and they function just as you'd expect. There's a new expansion this time around in the form of these energy parts. Collecting 4 of them nets you a full energy tank. Actually, energy parts were in other— No, they're brand new. Trust me. Dread introduces a fusion of the diffusion beam from Fusion and your regular beam, called the diffusion beam. I think that's the most amount of times I've said fusion in one sentence. Its blasts leave a large impact big enough to just barely penetrate walls, either to blow the fuck out of the terrain or kill enemies hiding under the surface. This brand new Metroid item is deadly and powerful and I adore it. But the diffusion beam is also in other— Again, the diffusion beam is a brand new Metroid item. Somebody fucking shut that guy up. Continuing on, there's mainstays like the bombs. Super missiles and ice missiles function like they did in Fusion in that they aren't treated as separate missile types, rather all of their powers are simply combined. The Spring Ball is now baked into the Morph Ball as a main function. Every beam you know and love stacks as they should. Power Bombs are now competing against Zero Mission's Power Bombs for the title of my most useless version in this franchise. The Screw Attack has been considerably buffed from Samus Returns. The Varia and Gravity Suits now each multiply the dash melee counter's attack power. Speed Booster can now be activated at any time during a sprint by pushing in the left stick. And the Shine Spark is more lustrous than I could have dreamed of. Cross bombs lay bombs in a cross formation, 4 per edge, so bombing breakable blocks isn't so tedious anymore, and they're required for a few neat puzzles. I found the storm missiles to be very situational, though that may change as I play through the game more and more. I use them only to hit these switches that need to be activated at the same time and for 1 or 2 mini-boss encounters. The Spider Magnet allows you to cling on to any magnetized surface and is the closest you'll get to single wall jumps without learning more advanced movement tech. You can also use the Grapple Beam to zip straight to them. And the Spin Boost is a discount space jump before you actually get to the space jump. Just as I wished for, Dread brings back Aeon abilities from Samus Returns. And for the most part, they're all brand new to fit in line with 3 of Dread's biggest gameplay aspects: exploration, combat, and stealth. Least exciting of the bunch is the Pulse Radar, as it's a neutered version of the Scan Pulse, although the feature that I like the most about the Scan Pulse, being able to reveal breakable blocks, is kept, so I can't really complain. Good thing map stations are back to alleviate the pain some may feel now that this ability no longer reveals the surrounding map layout. Whoever came up with the flash shift deserves a raise. It's not only great for movement, but it makes combat much more energetic too, since it can be used as a super fast dodge. Lastly, the Phantom Cloak is used a few times to get past specific doors undetected and used the other 99% of the time to avoid getting caught. It's time to talk about Dread's main gimmick, the source of the titular Dread, the EMMI. These HAL 9000 rejects are invincible, even if Samus is at full power. Nothing in her regular arsenal will make them flinch. Only with the immense firepower of a temporary upgrade you steal from these central units, the Omega Cannon, can you actually destroy an EMMI for good. Aside from the first EMMI encounter though, you're not just going to be given this right away at the start of an EMMI zone. So until you find the area's central unit, you have to avoid the EMMI by any means necessary. Because it can't be bargained with, it can't be reasoned with, it doesn't feel pity, or remorse, or fear. And it absolutely will not stop. Ever, until you are dead. So, what are your options here? You can play the stealth game, utilizing the Phantom Cloak and move as quietly as possible because yes, the EMMI can even detect sound. Or my preferred method, run for your life and hope to God you find an exit before it catches you. These segments are nerve-wracking like you wouldn't believe. Every time I just narrowly avoided the third EMMI, the one with the speed booster, you bet I was clenching my ass as it acted like a GameStop employee trying to get me to pre-order the latest Call of Duty. Of course, these are evocative of the SAX segments from Fusion, though the SAX has got nothing on these fuckers if you ask me. I'd say the EMMI are most similar to the tyrants from the Resident Evil games, specifically Mr. X and Nemesis. But even Mr. X and Nemi are not instant kill. You do have 2 opportunities to counter the EMMI. giving you a bit of time to get away from them, but you are granted a very small window to pull them off, and the timing changes slightly every time. As Adam says, don't rely on it, just don't get caught. You should try to treat these stealth segments as just that, stealth segments. Meaning don't bum rush into a room without waiting a bit first, and use that phantom cloak when you can, which, if you've played Samus Returns, don't worry, your Aeon meter recharges automatically in Dread, so you don't need to be afraid of running out completely while you're in an EMMI zone. That would have made all of this much more difficult. Speaking of difficulty, that's been a topic of contention surrounding the game since it came out. Well, that and a bunch of other things. I guess Mercury's team really likes challenging their audience because yeah, if you thought Samus Returns was hard, Dread ramps up the difficulty a considerable amount. Samus has more moves at her disposal this time, and the developers expect you to use them to their full potential if you want to make it to the credits. There's still an abundance of checkpoints and stations to refill your energy and ammo, but you're expected to bring your A game, as ZDR will put your skills to the test whether you like it or not. Like with Samus Returns, I think that with enough patience and determination, anyone can beat this game, even if their playtime may exceed what's usually common for Metroid. It is a fair type of hard, but this game will kick your ass. It certainly kicked mine, and I've been playing Metroid games for about 13 years at this point.
Surprise, motherfucker!
If you want to know where the challenge of this game largely stems from, my deaths were pretty evenly split between two parts, the first being the EMMI zones and the second being the boss fights. These may be the toughest bosses in Metroid history, but I believe they are also the best bosses in Metroid history. Just the right amount of phases, variety, and best of all, challenge. Cause to me, 2D Metroid bosses have been going down in quality since Super Metroid. There were a good number of them in Fusion, but they were all piss easy, minus Nightmare. Zero mission bosses, I swear if I sneezed, Ridley still would have died. Samus Returns was a step in the right direction with its Ridley fight, and while I like the Diggernaut fight too, it does get pretty mindless on repeat playthrough since I know how to easily avoid everything, and I'm just sort of left waiting for an opening to attack like it's a 3D Zelda boss. Fighting a boss in Dread pumps me the hell up. I shift gears into full-on palm-sweating gamer mode. I love all of these, from Corpius to the Experiment to the thick boy himself, motherfucking Kraid. If I had to choose a low point, I'd have to say Jogaiga isn't all that exciting to me since it takes place underwater before you get the gravity suit. And the Chozo robot and soldier mini bosses are really cool at first, but they just get repeated over and over again, and don't change things up aside from ganging up on you a few times for a 2v1. These would have been much better as unique one-time encounters if you ask me, or at least no more than 2 encounters for each. Of all the ways that Dread managed to subvert my expectations, like the bosses and gameplay, I think the game's structure and the design of ZDR is what astonished me the most. What made it all the more impactful is that at first, I thought this was going to be one of my biggest negatives about the game. Starting off, the game is extremely linear, almost frighteningly so. There was usually just one path I could take, everything else was off limits. Even after getting the charge beam, there was a clear route the game wanted me to take. I was getting very worried that Mercury's team may have decided to forego freedom and exploration for an even more streamlined and action-focused experience than Fusion. Let me remind you that I still very much enjoyed Fusion, but this may be a bit much. But as I made more progress and unlocked more upgrades, I started noticing the game opening up more. There was still a path I was clearly supposed to take to progress the story. Like really, 9 times out of 10, the first door you see is the door you need to go through. If you see a teleportal along the path, chances are that you're gonna need to use it and your next objective will be in the region it takes you to. But I was starting to see more options and opportunities to explore and go off that beaten path. This was validated more as the story route actually had some required backtracking to new sections of regions I had already been in. Suddenly, I came to the realization that Adam wasn't even placing a glowing dot on my map highlighting where my next destination was like the GBA games did. And then, the most wonderful thing happened. Not only did I get lost after getting a bit sidetracked with item collection, but later on, my detour led me back to the arena where I fought Kraid and I found this curious contraption that required bombs. And while before these things would simply be a means of skip travel within an area, this one just spat me out. Almost like I was supposed to land somewhere or inside something. When I connected the dots, my mind shattered into a million pieces. Was it possible to get bombs before fighting Kraid? Is it possible to sequence break? Mercury Steam designed ZDR knowing that some players would want to try to get certain items out of order. So they put in cool shit like a fast method of killing Kraid to reward those players, and incentivize them to experiment in an attempt to break the sequence as much as possible. Never in a million years did I think we would get another 2D Metroid game structured like Zero Mission, and even if we did, I did not think that game would be Dread, the sequel to Fusion. Sure enough, when I beat the game and looked online, I saw people were already discovering ways to get early grapple beam, early gravity suit, skip the first EMMI, skip Drogaiga, skip the space jump. Okay, I'll just stop right there because speedruns for this game are developing too quickly for me to keep up. There are multiple ways to get from area to area, multiple ways to get lost, multiple ways to play the game. What's so impressive is, like I said, the game still manages to be deceivingly railroaded, and I think that's a feat that the team should be applauded for. ZDR was a blast to fully explore, even before I knew about the sequence breaking, and extras serve as the cherry on top of this delicious Metroid sundae. From the way you can manipulate terrain and water levels, to the incredible environmental storytelling and the way that regions will dynamically change to reflect what's happening in the plot. If anything, I wish there was more time spent outside in natural environments. Judging by these wide shots, this planet's biomes must be breathtaking. Like Fusion, a lot of time is spent in indoor industrial themed areas, and the EMMI zones specifically look kinda generic and uninspired. And while I sang high praises about the level design as a whole, off the top of my head, Gaveron sticks out like a sore thumb. After you pull this grapple block, you essentially cut off the only route that conveniently connects one end of the area to the other. So now if you want to get to the other side, you have to make your way all the way around. Somebody fucked up there. At least I can admire how the region looks. Metroid Dread is a gorgeous video game. If 2D Metroid has to be made in a 2.5D style from now on, this is the way to do it. Endless amount of background detail, a slick art style, buttery smooth unique animations for every little thing Samus does, beautiful lighting and shadows and reflection work, and they say the Switch can't do ray tracing. A dynamic camera that makes the world feel larger than life, eye-catching particle effects, and to cap it off, 60 frames per second. It's not a perfect 60, but it's good enough for a game late in the Switch's life. Oh god, make it stop. Samus's suit design in this game is one of my favorites thus far. I wasn't sure how to feel about the added white pieces of armor at first, but it's grown on me and it goes really well with the gravity suit, I think. And the sound design is top notch as well, with the exception of the item fanfare for expansions, or rather, the lack thereof. I know it was already toned down in Fusion, but here, just a few beeps and dead silence. Major upgrades still have the classic jingle at the very least, and yeah, it's pretty great. I have to highlight the sound design in the EMMI zones. It's a big reason why these sections are so tense, with how the sounds from the EMMI clue you into how close they are and serve as a constant reminder that you need to get your ass moving.
Hey, Vsauce, Michael here. How fast can you run?
As for the soundtrack though, sadly it's one of my least favorites in the series, I've gotta say. It's a very atmospheric and quiet OST, and I appreciate how area themes change in tandem with the environmental changes that occur throughout the game. And when the game needs to ramp things up, the music gets louder and the tune shifts to something more dramatic that evokes a sense of danger. I just like it when Metroid soundtracks can strike a balance between ominous and catchy, you know? Something that I can bop my head to. I understand that wouldn't have fit here though. I'm not a composer, so what do I know? I'm just an introvert talking about a dumb space video game about bird people and the robot from WALL-E. I don't know shit. In terms of real negatives, there's not much that bothered me personally. Okay, there were a few things. For one, a few cutscenes such as the prologue can't be skipped. In today's age, I think that's quite the oversight in a game that thrives on its replayability. I think the whole EMMI part of the game ended in an anticlimactic way, at least gameplay wise. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a little cheated not knowing that the 6th EMMI would be the last one I'd face outside of a cutscene. However, 5 of these cat and mouse scenarios does feel like the sweet spot. Maybe 6 would have caused this whole mechanic to become stale. And of course, there's the post-game. This wouldn't be a Metroid video on this channel if I didn't bring it up. I'm not gonna focus on it too much though, because 1. Of all the 100% playthroughs I've done of the games that came after Super Metroid, Dread is the one I had the most fun with because simply playing it is such a delight. And 2, the game is still pretty new, so I don't feel comfortable making absolute judgments about the post-game, since there may very well be super optimized routes in the future that will cut down the retread significantly. I will still complain though about how shoehorned power bombs feel again in this game, as their number one purpose is to just get more expansions and more power bombs. At least they're useful in the final boss. But more than Fusion, Zero Mission, and definitely Samus Returns, this in no way is enough to affect my final verdict. How could it be? Metroid Dread, like a certain fan game I know and love, is a Metroid fan's Metroid game. This is undoubtedly my favorite depiction of Samus Aran that we've ever gotten. Mercury's team managed to characterize her perfectly, just with body language, facial expressions, and the occasional grunt and Chozo dialogue. You hear that, Kotaku? Just cause a character isn't smiling doesn't mean they're emotionless. I was popping off when she took down the first boss like a freaking action movie hero. The display of confidence from her unflinching reaction to Kraid's lunge, followed by her giving him a fully charged beam shot right in his disgusting mouth, badass is legitimately the best way to describe Samus in Dread. I know I should have seen this coming since this is a Fusion sequel, but my jaw hit the floor when I reached the halfway point and saw that the X were back. ZDR goes to absolute shit after they're released, really selling how ruthless and deadly they are. Although the Atom convos are technically unskippable like in Fusion, they made speeding through his dialogue much quicker, and I don't mind them at all now because of that. I've never been so happy to see speed booster puzzles make a return. I know some people hate how strict some of them can be, but all I have to say to that is, get good. Chozo archives are your reward for getting 100%. Depicting what Quiet Robe and Ravenbeak were doing in the time between the last Chozo memory from Samus Returns and the beginning of Dread. There's even this really cool artwork you can unlock for beating the game under a certain time for normal and hard mode. Art for all the mainline 2D Metroid games and these elevator and cargo ship transitions are glorious. It's the little things like these that go a long way in making this game click with me. Same goes for the final boss and escape sequence. Following up such an intense battle with the final escape with the overkill hyper beam, tearing ZDR and its inhabitants a new asshole in the process, is the perfect cathartic way to end the most perilous mission that Samus has taken on. When I inserted the game cart into my Switch, saw that title screen animation for the very first time outside of a trailer, I had to pinch myself to believe I was actually about to play Metroid 5. And it didn't fully set in until I selected a save file and I was greeted to that orgasmic rendition of the theme of Super Metroid and read Samus's recap of the events of Fusion accompanied by these wonderful illustrations. That's when I was like, man, this is real. Metroid Dread is real. And 10 hours later I was so happy to be able to follow that up with Metroid Dread is outstanding. Dread is the ultimate blend of Fusion's atmosphere and tension, Zero Mission's freedom and breakneck pace, and Samus Returns' combat, now refined and perfected. What Mercury's team managed to accomplish with their second Metroid game deserves all the praise I could possibly muster. It reminds me of Retro Studios and their Donkey Kong games, where their first outing was certainly really good despite fumbling in a few places, but their second outing improves upon the first so much that it's no contest. While I may like Samus Returns just a tiny bit less now that I've played Dread, I appreciate it even more now because without it, I don't think that Dread would have turned out as exceptional as it did. You know, whenever my first impressions of a game are super high, I inevitably have to ask myself, is the game actually as good as I think it is, or is this just a really bad case of recency bias? But I'm about 99% certain that the answer to that is, it's actually this good. Years from now, I'm sure I will still look back fondly at Metroid Dread as one of Samus's greatest adventures and one of my favorite games of all time. You know what, screw it. I wasn't planning on adding this in the video, but I'll just go ahead and add it to my tier list that I showed at the end of my Samus Returns video. So, here you go. To me, Super Metroid just barely beats it out because of my obvious bias towards it and because I just think it's an absolute masterpiece in a class of its own. But like, I couldn't even predict that I'd be putting Dread above the great category, let alone above my other two darlings, Zero Mission and AM2 War. Though not by much, I should stress, I still can't get enough of those games either. So do what you must, whatever it is. If you want to make this your first Metroid game or want to play some of the previous games first, I don't care, just go out and buy Metroid Dread. I bought 2 copies, that's how much I wanted to support this franchise. Okay, what actually happened was I managed to order a copy of the special edition the day it came out. By that point it was too late to cancel my order of the standard edition, but that's besides the point. Ignore this is a stupid joke. The point is, Metroid Dread is fucking fantastic. And with that, I am done with 2D Metroid. Of course, I'm going to plan a similar Road 2 retrospective when we get a release date for Prime 4, but right now I am more than content with Metroid Dread, the impossible game that went above and beyond. Until next time, be safe, take care, I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching.